All right, today we are going to do kind of a review, I guess, of all the villains in Marvel Champions. I'm sorry, not Marvel Champions, Age of Apocalypse for Marvel Champions. Because a lot of people have been asking what my overall thoughts are of these villains, and I haven't done the campaign mode, so I feel like I can't review the box as a whole. And I haven't talked about all the aspect cards that have come with it yet. So I'm thinking I might save that for a different video of like doing aspect cards and the campaign. Whenever I get to the campaign, I have no ambition to do that campaign. I don't know why. It just does not look interesting to me. So there's that. But anyway, a lot of people have asked about what I've thought about the villains, especially since I came out with a preview video originally where I said I thought Apocalypse would be the worst because there's two apocalypsi. Then I had the Four Horsemen was next, and then Dark Beast, and then Unis, and then finally the other apocalypse, right? And I said that the fifth apocalypse would be the best apocalypse, and the third one would be the worst. So anyway, a lot of people have been like, well, now that it's been out and you've been able to play it a bunch, like, do you still stand by that? Or things different, or things, changing, whatever it may be. So first we're gonna kind of quickly go through all the villains, and then we're gonna talk a bit and like what I kind of like and dislike, and then we'll talk about like my final like ranking of the villains. So let's start with Unis. Unis, we're not gonna go crazy in depth with all this stuff because most people I think know the villains by now. But Unis has been pretty interesting in the way that he works with his whole gene pool thing that he has going on. So depending on how much threat is on gene pool, one of these three things happen, and it's basically the same for all of them, right? The only difference with Unis is that health increases and his stat line increases. So he would gain Retaliate, which a lot of times he has Retaliate all the time, basically. Then he can gain Stalwart, and then finally the Amplify boost icon. So the whole hunting gene traders thing, the main scheme, the threshold's really kind of high at 11. Starts at 0, only goes up by 1, but you're also putting a threat onto the main scheme each time, which has been pretty interesting. Then he has his weapon that, is kind of stopping chump blocking and all that stuff. We talked a bit about this before. He's got some minions out there. He's got different things that add on basically to his stat line, right? And then he has another one revealed, Infinite Prelate, which basically does kind of the same exact idea with the gene pool of depending on how much threat is on it, he gets a tough status, or you get to heal him, or additional boost card, right? There's a couple of them, and then endless ranks where you place more threat on the gene pool, right? You can kind of see how this already works. Really quick, let's just pop down to gene pool because it is kind of important to see it. Which is a part of the infinite set. So it comes in with 4. And this was the thing that, ooh, I am in the way. This was the thing that was supposed to kind of get you to stop chump blocking, right? So the idea is after an ally is defeated by anything other than consequential damage, place 3 threat here. So yeah, it's pretty interesting in the way that it works. The infinite soldier thing is interesting. It can get out of hand pretty quick though, because being like, okay. I've had a situation where there's 6 threat on gene pool, right? And I have surged I have gotten infinite soldier surged with 6 threat. So they quick strike me for 2 damage. Then they surge into another infinite soldier, quick strike me for another 2, and then surge into a third one, and then surge into something else. It can get kind of out of hand pretty fast. It's actually kind of interesting in the way it works. I mean, it's terrible at the time when it's happening. You're just like, this is spiraling out of control. But I do like it that you do kind of have to pay attention to gene pool, that once you get the 4 down and you don't chump block, you find different ways to handle things. You can kind of keep that whole thing in check. And then in turn, that will help keep Unis in check from really kind of doing the stuff on his card, right? And him having Stalwart isn't the worst thing in the world. The Retaliate stinks. I like to get him off of Retaliate as fast as possible, unless I have a ranged hero, and then you can get around it, right? His minions, his attachments, all this stuff can be rough. We're not going to get into too much depth for it because we got a lot to talk about. But all this stuff is pretty, I think, interesting in the way that it works overall. This was a campaign situation I was pretty excited about, and it definitely seems to be good in my opinion. Is it overly hard? No, I don't think it's overly hard. I think it's pretty straightforward, but I do thoroughly enjoy it. All right, so next was Four Horsemen. And this is the one I've played the least out of all of them. So my rule of thumb is to try to play things like a dozen times, like 10 to a dozen times. And I played them just about a dozen times. It might be 11. I might be shortchanging you one play. Because I don't enjoy this. I don't enjoy this scenario. Now, people have told me it's better multiplayer, and I played it once as multiplayer, and I get why it's a better multiplayer situation. I totally understand that. I think as solo is just not a great situation. And Unis is good multiplayer or solo. It doesn't matter which. Or it's fine, I guess. So you have your 4 Apocalypse horsemen people, right? And the way that they come out is always randomized, which is kind of nice to change things up, right? So when you first get this card, you shuffle the 4 horsemen villains, then reveal them in the row left to right. Place the active token on the leftmost one. Each player reveals a random set-aside scheme for the 4 horsemen encounter deck, or for the from deck. So this side scheme, right, that you're gonna put in, are they all right here? I think they are. They kind of work a little bit with whatever the horseman is, in the sense of like it's like kind of related to them, right? So the Ravages of War, when defeated, the player who defeated this scheme discards upgrade or support the control. Adds extra bad card. Time of Famine, right? You discard top cards of your deck. It's a boost icon. Plague and Pestilence. The player who defeats this scheme treats their identity text box if it were blank until the next villain phase begins, right? Comes in with, they're all 6, right? Yeah, they're all 6. The Spectre of Death, right? The player who defeated this scheme deals 1 damage to each character they control, which can actually be really rough if you're running a cheap ally deck. There's a boost icon. For me, the strategy is to get rid of this side scheme, whatever it is, as quickly as possible, because they will be rough for you. And then the actual villain defeat order, right? There is a proper order, in my opinion, and death needs to go first, right? So after death attacks you and has at least 1 hit point, deal 1, or no, not death. I'm sorry. War is what I'm thinking, not death. War is the one you want to go after first. So War is after War attacks you. If he has at least 1 hit point, discard, upgrade, or support you control. That's really rough, right? Especially if you have, first round Avengers Mansion out, right? And he attacks you, then you've lost it, right? So as a solo player, he only comes in with 9 on standard, 12 on expert. Get through that pretty quick, at least before he comes out. Like if he's third in line, right, you have like 2-3 rounds to like really worry about him. So the first round you can focus in on the side scheme, and then after that you can focus in on War. The other ones aren't as bad, right? So Famine, you discard the top 10 cards of your deck, which stinks, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Pestilence, you treat your box as if a blank. Some heroes, this is great, like Hulk. Others, it's not as great. Like if you're using Domino, it completely wrecks Domino, but you can still like get by, but it still stinks. And then Death deals 1 damage to each character you control. If you're running a cheap chump block deck, then this kind of stinks, right? This can be a little bit rough. As far as the main threat goes, it is up to 12, which is huge. After a villain activates, move the active counter to the next villain. So they just kind of go in order, and you can kind of expect it, or you can kind of expect things to happen a certain way. The threshold is pretty high, so it does allow you on solo to kind of put like a space van on here, right, to add 4 threat to the scheme. So it's up to 16, which is a massive amount. None of these minions these villains are scheming for that much on standard. So flipping down doesn't allow them to do their forced response. It's only on attacks. So really playing around with that of like flipping a ton is kind of the way to go. I'm not a big into flipping, right? So I'm not as big into that. So it's not as exciting for me. And then they have different attachments and kind of, they work on different things. The horses attached to really any villain. Except for Death, and then Death gets his metal wings, and then the different, cards come on. Rough Riders, DMX, let's go. It's a fine scenario, right? I just feel like for solo, it's very, very easy. There's a very distinct pattern. Like I said, get rid of War first. Then I like to get rid of Death. And then Famine and Pestilence kind of depends on my hero, and that's it. And again, 9 hit points, 9 hit points, 9 hit points, 9 hit points on standard. On Expert, 12 hit points, 12 hit points, 12 hit points, 12 hit points. Like on expert, that can be rough, but that's not the worst thing in the world. It really isn't. There's good hero strategies to do 12 hit points on your first turn, right? Maybe you're not getting rid of your side scheme then, but 12 isn't like, it's not easy, but it's not the hardest thing in the world to do. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think for solo, this is just way too easy of a scenario. It's not very interesting to me. It's not very exciting. But again, I've heard people say, no, it makes a lot more sense on multiplayer because you're getting a lot more of these attachment cards and these encounter cards. And this is what kind of makes it more interesting. And these different treachery cards, like these cards can be really rough. If you are playing and you get excuse me, something from 2 other modular sets, the Dystopian Nightmare Hounds or whatever it is, right? They dilute the deck a lot. So you can play a lot of rounds where you just get the Dystopian Nightmare Hound cards, and they can be rough on their own. But what really makes this thing click is all the 4 horsemen cards can be really rough, right? Heal 2 damage from Pestilence, give her a tough stats. And this is rough because they're never really fully knocked out, right? They can't be defeated until everyone's down to 0 life. So if Pestilence is at 0, right, they would still like activate against you. They just wouldn't do their forced response thing, but then Pestilence can heal back up. And that's what would be rough on it. And so if you have more players, you get more of these bad cards out there to do the thing, right? And that's what makes it hard. And I get it from that perspective. So a lot of people have told me this is more of a multiplayer scenario. I totally get it. I totally agree with them. It's not one I enjoy solo, but multiplayer, I understand the argument for a lot more. All right, Apocalypse, the third Apocalypse. This is my, I guess, more or less sleeper hit. Like, not that I thought it was gonna be bad, but I thought it was gonna be completely overshadowed by other Apocalypse. And it might be the other way around. This Apocalypse comes with 4 stages. You're supposed to kind of start in stage 2, right? As like a standard game. But if it's too hard or you just want to, you can drop down to the first one. It can be whatever you want. That's the brilliance of these games. And basically the whole idea is that when the main scheme is completed, remove all threat from it and then go to the next Apocalypse stage, right? So if you start at 1 and it threats out, which its total amount is whatever their hit points are. So it's 8 here. So it going up by 1 each time is like, could be a little rough. So main threat goes up, then Apocalypse goes up to the next stage, the next stage, the next stage. And then when he gets to this one, basically you just lose the game, right? Apocalypse keeps getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So it's kind of a weird timing mechanic in the way that it works. I really enjoy it, actually. I think it's fun because there is strategy to just like, I'm going to let the main scheme go. It does not matter to me because, you know, him popping up from 2 to 3 isn't the worst thing in the world, right? You just kind of have to time things out, and you don't want to like have him down to 1 life and then all of a sudden like he's up to like, you know, what is that, 10 life. What's interesting is, and then when you defeat Apocalypse, or when you try to defeat him, you discard each attachment from him and heal all damage from him instead, and then you remove X threat from here, where X is just whatever the hit point value is. So it's a way to clear out the scheme. If he was down to 1 life and this had 7, you know, threat on it or whatever, you could clear it out by dealing the 1 damage. That play, that interaction is really, really kind of neat. Now, the big thing in this deck is the prelate minions, which we'll get into in a second, but we have to get into the side scheme thing, because the question with this was, would it start to feel like Hela a little too much? Was it going to be Hela close to Hela? So it starts off of Heart of the Empire, and threat cannot be removed from this scheme while there's a prelate minion in play. And then when defeated, the first player reveals a random set aside prelate minion, and then you deal everyone else an encounter card, and you flip this over, and it starts off with 1 acceleration icon, then moves on to 2, and then moves on to 3. So there's an interesting like timing pattern here. Excuse me. You have to be able to really know when to flip and built out properly, not just to flip it and like try to, like, because you just can't clear it out, right? So if you get the Tyrant's Throne, when a new prelate minion comes into play, you can't just like clear out the thing, right? You have to get rid of that minion first, which is really interesting. It's really interesting in the way they do it. Did I already miss the minions? I think I did, right? So let's find them really fast. No, I did not. Are they just further down, or do they not have them? I guess they don't have them here, which is weird. I should have looked at that first. Or is it just below it? No, it's just not here. Okay, so they don't have it here. But anyway, there's 5 minions that it could possibly, I believe it's 5. And it's really cool in the way that they work, that they pop out. And like, they're a decent challenge. I think each one has like 5 or 6 hit points. So they're not like overpowered strong, but they're definitely, you gotta kind of deal with them, right? Oh wait, are these them? Oh yeah, here we go. So you have Mr. Sinister. So they have another side, which I think is related to the campaign, because I've never used that side. So Mr. Sinister with like 5 hit points, Shadow King with 5, Sugarman with 5, Abyss with 5, and Rasputin with 5, right? But they each have like their own thing that they're adding to the game, which is kind of interesting. So Sinister has a Retaliate, Toughness, and Villainous, right, with a 1/1 stat line. Okay. Then we have Shadow King, a 3/1/5 stat line. It comes in with toughness. Sorry. After the Shadow King attacks you, choose an ally you control the highest thwart. Either discard the ally or place threat in the main scheme equal to that thwart. Is like kind of cool in the way that they're doing that. I really like how that's kind of built out. Abyss. Abyss gets +2 hit points for each face down card attached to him. So after Abyss activates against you, attach the top card of your deck face down to him. Taking away your good cards is always rough, and then now he gets like more life. So you're it's like a slower battle, which is interesting. Sugar Man comes in with tough. When Sugar Man attacks, the attacks gain piercing. If this attack defeats a character, heal 5 damage from Sugar Man. Obviously rough. And then Rasputin comes in with tough. When Rasputin attacks you, deal 1 damage to your identity. So he's already just like doing more damage. Abyss was a 2/2 stat, 2/2/5. Sugar Man was 1/3/5, 2/2/5 for Rasputin. So it's not like the hardest things in the world, but they will slow you down and kind of distract you from what you're supposed to be doing, which is like getting through the Tyrant's Throne, right? And then even when you defeat the Tyrant's Throne, right, and you don't have to worry about Apocalypse as much, because we're not have to worry about the main scheme as much, you still have to deal with another prelate minion, right? Like they still come out, which is kind of cool. So what's interesting is after you do the Tyrant's Throne, they're no longer worthy. You heal 5 damage from Apocalypse, which is good because a lot of the ways that you could get around this were to get Apocalypse down to 1 health, knock out the prelate minion and just like exhaust a win. And this basically stops you from like exhausting the win. So you still have to like usually take an extra turn or so. His attachments are pretty basic, adding 1 to attack, adding 1 to scheme, and, gains overkill and places a scheme on each side scheme, right? Gets retaliate and stalwart, attached to a minion type of thing. All these are good. All these are fine. I like the Wolf Among Sheep. It's kind of interesting with the prelate minion activates against you first because they can be rough. And then if they're not there, Apocalypse activates against you. So I like this Apocalypse design a lot. I think it's different enough from Hello where like Hello, you knew the combination of things every single time, right? You knew that it was going to be a certain minion and a certain size game every single time. With this, yes, the size games are the same, but the minions are different, and they're different enough and they're interesting enough that it never felt samey in all my plays, right? It always felt fresh and interesting and unique, and I really enjoyed it. So I am a fan of this for sure. I definitely like this whole play. Like I like this whole thing. I really do. I liked it a lot more than I thought it was going to. It never felt samey. It felt good. You couldn't just not defeat Apocalypse, right? Because like the whole thing says like when Apocalypse would be defeated, you have to discard attachments from him. And this is key because like these attachments, right? When you attach to Apocalypse and gains overkill +1 attack, and then place schemes, place threat on there, like that stuff is really rough, right? If you get both those on there, or especially the retaliate one, because there's no other way to get this off besides defeating him. So it was fun that it kind of made you defeat him, where Hela, yes, it was the same idea, but you really defeat it to like flip it at certain times, right? There was a certain like pattern with Hela, and it's very hard to explain until you see it done. But I like the whole way that this thing worked. I really enjoyed Apocalypse. All right, next up we have Dark Beast, who is fine. He's very straightforward, and for a box that, look, even if I don't like 4 Horsemen, I think what they're doing is interesting. This was the least interesting villain, but it didn't throw you any curveballs, right? Which was nice in a way. So Dark Beast starts off with 2/2 stat line with 15 life. Excuse me. So when Dark Beast attacks you, and this is for all the same steps, right? You resolve the special ability on the settings environment. And this is what you're going to see throughout most of this game, is the different settings that are out there. Now, the most important one, obviously, is the dinosaurs. This is the one we all love. But they have different environments. So, like, the villain gains retaliate with the dinosaurs. And the specials, you discard the top 3 cards of your deck. Genosha, the villain gains steady. Place 1 threat in the main scheme, which this one isn't that bad. And Blue Moon, each minion gains guard, and you deal 1 damage to your identity. So each time he attacks, one of those 3 things is going to keep happening to you over and over. It never felt overwhelming. It just was like an annoying or a nuisance like the entire time. You know what I mean? Like it was never like crazy bad. It just was like this thing that bothered you all the time. So when you reveal him along, you set in a different encounter set, right? And then deal each player an encounter card when you get further up. basically you remove the setting from it, but the other bad cards come in. So if you were playing with dinosaurs, for example, because they are the best ones, the setting stuff wouldn't take effect, right, on for Savage Land, but it would still do whatever the setting is in there, right? So if you got the Velociraptor, it would quick strike you, and then when it attacks you, discard a top card. Well, that's not a good example. It doesn't have settings. What about Giant Ape? All right, Giant Ape. The player who defeated Giant Ape resolves the special ability in the setting environment. So it doesn't have to be Savage Land that's in. It could be any one of them that's in. So that's a good way that they did that. That's very, very smart. But yeah, so I liked this whole kind of setup with these special cards. I thought, wow, I'm really overshooting that. I thought it was pretty cool. So the one thing it makes you do is on expert, you put in the high tech goggles, which, okay, like I don't flip down a ton, so this wasn't a big thing, and it's very easy to clear. You just do the special and you move on with your life. And if the special is happening when you want it to happen, it's not too bad. It's also a very big main threat with 10 on it. Only goes up by 1, not too bad. Now some of the specials add threat, or some of the cards add threat into the main scheme, so it could be a little faster than you think it will be. So you do have to look out for that. His attachments can be rough. Cruel Experiment on a minion is pretty hard. His Evil Genius thing did cause me to lose quite a few games. Again, it's very straightforward, right? He's just, excuse me, he's just attacking you and you give him an additional boost card, or he's scheming and you get the tough stats, right? The additional attacking boost card kind of like messes things up for you, or it can for you. And if you add that with Genetic Enhancement, so he gets +1 attack, it can be really rough. But all this stuff is just straightforward, right? Evil Genius, and the way that it works, I think it's a good card. It's just very straightforward. And that's Dark Beast in a nutshell to me. Is very straightforward. There's not anything fancy out there. This is a hero design I would expect from them in like the second, maybe third box, as far as like how complicated it can be. Now, does this make that a bad scenario? No, not at all. I actually like this scenario a lot because it's nice to just not have to check this side scheme, this environment, this play, this over here. Okay, that interacts with that, and that. I just want to play a casual game of Marvel Champions sometimes, and to me, that's Dark Beast, right? Dark Beast is that casual game, and it's really nice that it does that. So I know a lot of people are hating on Dark Beast. I actually like the way that he works a lot. Now, Apocalypse. I don't really like this scenario that much. I mean, it's fine. I played it a bunch. I finally stopped messing up the rules on it because I kept messing up rules on it with one of the attachments, right? This one. I really hate the wording of this card where it's not where it's attached to Apocalypse and changed into giant form. I need my notes that say like, response or when revealed. I need like a when revealed note. It's just like a thing for me. But anyway, I used to make that a rules mistake all the time. Now I make it less frequently. But basically, this is the scenario where you have a giant flip card, right? The card flips in different ways, and it's a cool gimmick. It's fun in the way that it works. He is not a hard villain. He's not a pushover, but he's not hard. I have a lot more difficulty with third Apocalypse, for sure. Even Dark Beast on Expert is harder to me than Apocalypse flip version on Expert is. Now, a part of the reason is because he comes in with a side scheme with Clan Akaba, with Ancient Ritual. I played this once in multiplayer, but people will tell me you have to play close to a 3 or 4 player, where this actually starts to like matter. So this card says, after threat is placed here, if there's at least 10 threat here, remove 5 threat from the scheme, deal each player face down a counter card. You can see how that would be rough. This has never triggered for me solo. Now, if I completely ignored it, it might 1 or 2 times, but generally speaking, I bring it down to like 2 threat, and that's it. So it never really did much for me. Now, the minions are rough, right? The minions are still rough solo, and they can get, this scheme to go up quite a bit. But they weren't like over the top hard. Celestial Tech was also really interesting in the way that this works. I was a fan of these cards in general. So even in 2-player, I only did them like twice in 2-player because again, I'm not really a multiplayer player of this game. I play a lot more solo. Even in 2-player, like it was harder, but it wasn't crazy hard. Like you just had to like kind of like pay attention to it. It was like an afterthought of the main scheme. What was interesting is this whole pyramid thing where you do these power counters, right? And this is the Magneto strategy, where after resolving step 1 of the villain phase, place 1 power counter here. If there's 4 counters here, the first player removes 4 of them and discards cards until a superpower card is discarded and reveals it. Now, some of the superpower cards, as you see, like they can be really rough. They can be really, really hard. There is a strategy that when you get near the end, right, you're getting close to the 4th round, that you just kind of flip down to let this pop, so it goes into this next thing, which the counters will clear off, just like it does for Magneto. Now, you still discard to get a superpower card, right? But the difference is like you're not doing the power counters and then like the next round it's popping, right? If that makes sense. So you're not getting hit with 2 superpower cards in a row. Like if you really want to flip down to like build up for a bigger push, it's just watch your timing, right? That's all I'm really saying with that. So it's kind of interesting how that can work. So the game starts with your face down reveal card. That's the part of the setup, right? Yeah. So it starts with setup with that. He's not easy, but he's not hard, right? He's a very like slightly above middle of the road difficulty, and I don't mind it. Like the gimmick is still fresh enough with the 3-sided Apocalypse that it's like, oh, this is interesting. But I've played him about a dozen times now, and I'm starting to lose interest. Right? I'm just starting to lose interest. He falls into this very typical pattern where you should just start rushing him to just kind of beat out on these counters and not have to deal with this whole like superpower thing. And like if he gets 1, it's not the worst thing in the world. But he does fall into this basically pattern where you want to rush him down. That's what you want to do. And on standard, he has 36 life, which is it's a fair amount, but it's not like a crazy amount. And I don't know. It's just he's fine. He's fine, right? It's not overly easy. It's not overly hard. It's very middle of the road feeling. He flips his stuff a lot depending on which of these cards he gets, right? So depending on what form he is, he either activates against you, which can be bad, or he changes to whatever it is, and then he places 1 power counter on the main scheme to kind of make that go faster. So it all can be rough, but it never felt that bad, right? I felt like I had harder and more difficult times with the 3rd Apocalypse in this scenario every single time, right? This scenario felt more straightforward and just like, okay, just keep beating on him. And then, as stuff comes up, we'll deal with it versus, okay, timing out the prelates and when to flip the side scheme and then when to attack Apocalypse. Like that just felt much more dynamic and interesting to me. So I thought this was going to be the harder, more interesting scenario. It's not, in my opinion. It's not a terrible scenario by any means. It's just not as good as what I thought it was going to be. So let us now rank the villains from my least favorite to my most favorite. All right, so we're going to get really fancy and use the old notepad. So the left column, the leftmost column, is what I was most excited for to least excited for, right? This was the preview video. So I was most excited for Apocalypse 2, then Unis, then Dark Beast, then the Horsemen, then Apocalypse 1. And I kind of wanted to show that so you can see what it was actually ended up being. So this is, first off, just my opinion, right? All these reviews are just my opinion on things. It's just how I feel about it. So if there is a a villain that I really like that you hated, it's all good, right? It's totally cool. And if I hated one that you like, that's not to try to take away from what you enjoyed or anything like that. It's just my personal thoughts and feelings. Again, just my opinion. Also, note that this is from mostly a solo perspective. Again, I've played these all multiplayer, only a handful of times, but I'm not primarily a multiplayer player. It's not the way I enjoy the game the most. I enjoy this game as a solo player more than multiplayer, so I'm always going to lean toward that when I do these things. All right, so with that, all that caveat stuff out of the way, and really quick, if you haven't yet, make sure you scroll down below and hit the Discord button and join our Discord. I think we're about 400 people there, and you should join. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so my least favorite of the group, right? The one I enjoyed the least is the Horsemen. I knew I wasn't going to care for it because it wasn't this thing I was super really into, right? It wasn't this scenario I thought was going to be great, but it was less fun in practice than I thought it was going to be. Now, in my overall ranking, when I rank them all at the end of the day, which we'll do at some point in the future, I still want to get a couple more playthroughs in this and play some of the older ones I've kind of forgotten a bit about again before I do another giant ranking, which we will do at some point. Is it going to be near the bottom? Not the bottom, but it's probably gonna be like in the lower third. Just because I don't like that type of scenario that much anymore, especially after Mutant Genesis, I think perfected it. So I'm not big into that scenario anymore, and I wasn't that excited about this. Now, I will admit it's better in multiplayer. I think it's a much better multiplayer scenario, and if you're into multiplayer, I think it makes a lot more sense for you then. As far as a solo player, I didn't enjoy it. It's a very predictable pattern. It's a very easy pattern. It's not fun for me. So then now, what I thought was going to be kind of Apocalypse 1 here is really going to be Apocalypse 2. He's just too straightforward. He's just not... He's fine, right? And when I do my giant list overall, he's probably going to be in the top half. Like 4 of these are going to be in the top half. He's fine, but he's not like a lot of fun. He's okay, right? I just expect more from a final boss. And I know people have made the argument thematically that like Apocalypse 2 should be weaker than Apocalypse 1. And okay, I mean, I guess I get that from like a box perspective of things, but this game is supposed to be kind of just like you mix and match things however you want, and there's not necessarily like a right order to play it. There's just like a general order that we've come to understand where like 1 is the easiest and 5 is the hardest, right? And it kind of is weird that that's not the case then. Like it feels weird, right? We still talk about this about Sabretooth to this day. I don't think Sabretooth is that hard of a villain to face. And he's actually kind of easy once you learn his pattern. But as far as a first boss or first villain in a box, he's probably the hardest that we've ever had. So a lot of people think that Sabretooth is way harder than he actually is because we naturally have this preconceived notion that the first should be the easiest, right? So it kind of mentally will throw you off on these things. We're like, no, does the 5th villain have to be the hardest? No, absolutely. It does not have to be, but we kind of expect it inherently that like, this is the big one that you're leading up to. Like when you do the reviews and the previews, like this is the thing we build up to, right? And if you're building up to something this big, it should be like the big bad guy, right? But it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't feel like the big bad guy. And if they're trying to go theme wise for this whole story effect, I get it then, but it's not really how Marvel Champions has ever really been. Now, I may like the campaign mode, but a lot of people don't play it that way. A lot of people don't see it that way. So it kind of feels like out of place. And they've never cared about that really in the past as far as I'm really concerned. So I don't know, whatever. Maybe they have to a point, but I don't know. It still just feels weird, right? It just feels weird. And that's not, I also want to stress is that's not necessarily like the designer's fault, right? It's not, I don't want to be like, oh, it's their fault that we feel this way. It's just how our brains naturally work, and to try to get around that is a tough thing in general. So anyway, I still enjoy Apocalypse 2. I still think he's a fun scenario. He's still gonna be in my top half. But I wanted more, I guess, from him. So next up, I'm actually gonna drop Unis down. Because he is still like a simple enough thing that like, okay, you just keep that side scheme down and then just hammer away on Unis. Unis gets tough when the side scheme for Gene Pool starts getting crazy. And then you start getting into surges with like the different infinite minions and stuff like that. That's when that stuff gets crazy hard. If you keep Gene Pool down, Unis is pretty straightforward, and it's just like a normal boss, and that's what I expect from a first boss, right? We're talking about this before with you know, if you're stage 5 or if you're the 5th boss in the box, I expect you to be really hard. First one, I expect you to be run of the mill, like it shouldn't be too complicated to beat you and whatnot. So yeah, so he's not necessarily dropping on my list, like I know it looks like it, and it's actually Dark Beast is moving up. Dark Beast, I didn't really have much expectations for it because he looked very simple in the way that he's executed. And he is very simple in the way that he's executed, but it's very well done, right? It's very well done overall, I think, personally. He's not doing anything crazy. He's not doing anything super outside the box. He's nothing like that, right? He is a very straightforward villain, but he does that perfectly, and I appreciate that. And it's just nice when I don't have to think about, okay, I need to read all these side schemes and all these obligations and all these treachery. Like, he's just very straightforward. He's very not complicated. He's very straightforward, and he's a good challenge. I appreciate that. Will he drop down in time? Maybe he'll just, the straightforwardness will feel boring after some time. But as of right now, it feels pretty good. So I'm pretty okay with it. But yeah, he's definitely been enjoyable. And I can make the argument for flipping with Unis. If Unis, you give him harder mod sets, his difficulty increases, especially if you find things that add threat onto like side schemes, then it becomes a lot more interesting. But that's a whole nother side thing. But yeah, no, it's the two of these could go either way. Apocalypse 1, which it's now embarrassing I put that last. So, don't judge me too much. I really thought Apocalypse 1 was going to be the weaker of the two because I thought the side scheme thing would be too repetitive like Hela. I thought he'd become too much like Hela. And maybe time will tell that he does become too much like Hela. But with how the prelate minions work, as of right now at least, it's different enough and it feels fresh enough that it feels good overall. Right? It feels really interesting and really exciting. So as of now, I love Apocalypse 1. Now, I know a lot of people are going to ask, okay, how does this compare to like Magneto? Magneto is my gold star standard, right? Magneto, I think, is the #1 villain in this game. I think it's absolute perfection in what they did. How does Apocalypse 1 hold up to him? And as of now, I'd probably put Apocalypse 1 on Mount Rushmore. I don't think he's taken Magneto's spot per se, but he's probably up there. I really have to sit down and think about this, and I want to play some of the older scenarios that I've really enjoyed. But as of right now, I think Apocalypse 1 is a Mount Rushmore contender, to say the least. And all these scenarios, with the exception of Horsemen, which is more of a me thing, not necessarily the game's problem, is all these scenarios have been really good, right? My biggest gripe with Next Evolution is that, especially now, I almost don't want to play any of the scenarios in that box. Not that I won't, but they're very easy. They're very boring. I'm not a big fan of them. I know people have argued that you can change the difficulty by various means and whatever. And yeah, you can. You can do that with anything. But as far as how they want you to play the game or how they recommend it, this whole box is a little bit step up in difficulty from what Mutant Genesis was, right? Maybe a little more than a little. But like at least parallel / a little bit higher, I would say. It's much better than Next Evolution in difficulty. It feels good all around, with the exception of Horsemen. These 4 villains that are here, like, I want to go against them a fair amount. Apocalypse 2 is slowly starting to drop off, where like I played him a lot recently, so I don't want to play him as much anymore. So maybe he comes back up eventually, but especially those top 3, I like those top 3 scenarios a lot, right? 3 new villains that are really good that I want to play all the time. It's more than I can say for Next Evolution, that's for sure. And to get a core group that's, I think, really good, really solid, I really enjoy. And like I said, Apocalypse 2, I played a lot right now. I think that increases. Horseman is probably just a scenario I'll play more on multiplayer. And who knows, maybe down the road I get into multiple villain scenarios in the future for solo, and this becomes like a more interesting thing for me. So I'm not going to do an overall list of where this falls, of like, is it the best box or the worst box? I know that people want that. We're going to save that for a different video because I want to play some of the older stuff again, to make sure I'm not relying too much on just the hype of the new stuff, right? Cult of the New, that I actually remember some of the older stuff that I really liked and focus on that stuff. So, but I will tell you that realistically, from glancing at this is, as of right now, a top 3 box, in my opinion. I don't know if it's going to fall 1 or 2 or 3 in that list, but I could safely say it's going to be a top 3 box. There's really no doubt in my mind about this. I think as far as the villains go overall, even if I have some gripes and disagreements with certain aspects of the game, it's really good. It's a really good villain box. And we're coming out with this after the reviews of Magic and Bishop, so I could talk about this. I think the heroes are really good. I think overall this box as a whole is really good, and that's why I would review it pretty well. I've really enjoyed it. I think it's been a lot of fun. Like I said, the scenarios have been good. The heroes so far have been good. I really enjoy it. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Have you enjoyed the villains from this box? What have you agree with me or disagree with me on? Which is a part of the beauty of this game, right? We can all disagree on this stuff, which is amazing because there's so many options now, right? There's so many choices, and this game is in such a healthy spot because of that. That if I hate the Horseman scenario, don't hate it, but if I don't like the Horseman scenario and you love it, it's all good. I have 30 some other scenarios that I like a lot. It's okay if I don't like one. So Anyway, let me know your thoughts down below. And a quick reminder, if I haven't said it already, because I don't remember if I said in the beginning of this video already, is scroll down, hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel. It helps the channel a lot. You wouldn't believe how much it actually helps out. Hit that button, turn on notifications so you know when I get a new video. If you haven't joined the live streams, go over to twitch.tv/D20 Woodworking, join the live streaming community. It's a lot of fun there. And I appreciate you all if you've watched the video all the way through. I know it's a bit of a longer video. We'll do some more stuff in the future. We'll review the entire cycle when it's done. We'll rank all the big boxes, all that fun stuff. But thank you so much for watching this. I really do appreciate it. See you all next time.